I'm a bird, mother. I'm a bird.
Employees leaks Ubisoft email calling activists dead weight. So, Ubisoft seems to have understood that they heavily messed up, but it's infested to a point where they don't even know how to fix their own issues anymore.
A very good up-and-coming YouTuber by the name of Alicorn TV recently shared a video covering a leaked email from an employee at Ubisoft sent directly to him that completely exposed the gaming giant's currently ongoing inner destruction. This leaked email talked about how activists were actually dead weight, and Ubisoft management has no idea how to fix the problem. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of SmashJT. This leaked email coming from Ubisoft tells everybody what we're all thinking, but it's fascinating to see that upper management at Ubisoft is finally catching on to what everyone already knew.
And honestly, I think the leakers at least are shining some light for us all to understand what exactly is happening. And I will link their original video as well.
Hit that subscribe, give me a like, and check out SmashJT.com for the full article breaking down this leaked email from Alicorn TV. In his video, Alicorn went through the details, discussing information that shed even more light on Ubisoft's struggles, organizational inefficiencies, and their increasing alienation from their own developers and the gaming audience in general.
Whether this person is real, whether this person actually works at Ubisoft, as you can imagine, this person is a little bit standoffish. They don't know me. They don't know really how I would handle an insider. It's not like I'm SmashJT or Endymion that has a sort of...
It's not just that, like, when you're an insider and you're leaking information, it could cost your job and reputation. So, if a leaker is reaching out, they're risking a lot.
track record with insiders. This would be the first insider ever that I'm speaking to outside of Blizzard Entertainment.
Alicorn not only received an email from this Ubisoft insider, but also contained within it was a revealing PDF. That document allegedly originated from someone on Ubisoft's marketing research team, detailing the company's repeated failures. What stood out to me was how Ubisoft developers were laughing at the document, as all it did was highlight the very same issues that they'd been raising for years, issues that Ubisoft management specifically had ignored until it became an actual crisis.
This is what shows that the people who are higher ups, they shouldn't have been in the industry because they don't know what they're doing, and they are confused why their customers are leaving. The rot is from the top that Ubisoft is having.
But fundamentally, it's pretty weird. So firstly, the developer reveals to me their own frustrations and actually tells me that them and a lot of their friends that work at Ubisoft just burst out laughing when they saw this PDF, because a lot of these things are things that they've been telling their higher ups for years now, and they didn't listen. And then the market research guys come out, and I'll be honest with you, reading through that PDF, it's like watching someone state the most obvious stuff ever.
So this finally answers my question, does Ubisoft even have a market research team? They do, and it's doggo. It's a Borg.
And you just go, but how is this not common knowledge?
The disconnect between Ubisoft developers and upper management is nothing short of insane at this point. The developers feel unheard, with decisions often dictated by market researchers and logistical bottlenecks rather than creativity or any kind of real expertise in the gaming world. While the document doesn't mention DEI specifically, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's hard for me to hear all of this and not immediately jump to the conclusion that DEI was a major part of the problem. And the document actually goes into further explaining why I feel that way.
Gaming today, according to these insiders, are more like a factory line and a logistical nightmare than it is about creativity.
Alicorn described the insider's comparison of Ubisoft's game development process to a factory line, where creativity gets completely suffocated by endless layers of bureaucracy. Not that anyone's really surprised at this point. As I've said, it feels like a million times by now, Ubisoft is bloated to the extreme. We're talking of just under 20,000.
They don't need that many employees. They cannot justify that many employees. I would understand if they would be releasing at least a couple bangers a year to justify, not even a couple, like multiple bangers a year to justify this number. 18.6 thousand employees. Ubisoft doesn't need all that stuff.
1,000 employees worldwide under the Ubisoft umbrella, and this company is barely managing to put out games worth playing. You could slash that employment in half and nobody would even notice a difference with the games.
The insider that works in QA actually revealed to me that just getting bugs fixed is almost impossible. The amount of bugs that they will report to a company, and then after a couple of weeks they'll just get a works isn't work,
and they're on back burner. Their bugs are being reported. They're on the back burner because it's paperwork on paperwork.
is designed won't fix.
The insider went on to lament the logistical nightmares that they've been dealing with involved in even the most minor of all tasks, such as fixing bugs on games. Developers face weeks of meetings just to approve a fix, making meaningful progress nearly impossible on the games they're working on.
Because they constantly have to go from meeting to meeting. It's ridiculous. This explains so many issues that Ubisoft is having. The developers, they're not able to actually do their game. The developers who actually want to work, they're not able to work on it because they need to go from approval to approval to approval to be able to fix what they know how to fix quickly.
On. Speaking from personal experience, when I was a quality assurance tester at Sony, hearing this is kind of abhorrent. Like, how do you even function as a company if you're working on fixing these bugs as a QA tester, knowing that there's going to be a brick wall at the end of the road? What's even the point of trying to work on them in the first place? When I worked as a QA tester, I would find the bugs, I would log them in the system, and sometimes I would even meet with developers, sit by them, and explain to them the specific problems with it to make sure we could come to a conclusion and ensure it gets fixed. Whereas I hear this story and it feels like Ubisoft didn't give a crap about the QA testers or fixing any problems with games. They'd rather have people sit in meetings than actually resolve problems.
Yeah. Getting a bug fixed.
Their priority is yapping and just having the lips flap than actually do work. When I was working in an office, having meetings was my least favorite thing. I hated it. So every time I had the mandatory meetings, which was like every single goddamn day, I made it a point. I'll show up, but I'll still continue doing my work.
Isn't as quick as the developer just quickly making a couple of changes. The logistical nightmare that is fixing a bug just makes it not a top priority for a lot of developers. They don't want to go through all of that, and so they would rather just not do it.
This factory-like approach over at Ubisoft has driven out the superstars, which is referred to as the best and brightest developers, those who are seeking opportunities at companies that value innovation.
I mean, why would they want to stick around in a company where they cannot actually put work into their baby without getting 10 different approvals? Of course they're gonna be like, I'm already known in this industry. Any other company will be happy to hire me and I don't have to deal with this whole mess. Of course they're gonna go.
Over politics and processes. Any real talent that was at Ubisoft at this point is all but gone, according to the leaked email. And speaking of the superstars, there was a striking insight from the leak of the classification of Ubisoft developers. In the email, they classify them in 3 different categories, with the first one being superstars, the highly skilled and often well-known. Most of them have already left Ubisoft. Then the second category, a ring down from that, being the good developers, who are talented but not prominent enough to secure jobs elsewhere. And then you have the problematic employees, referred to as the dead weight. And these were the...
I'm assuming that would be the majority.
I think so too, because there's way too much.
people that we're referring to as the activists.
Then there's the what he refers to as the good developers, but they don't have brands. They don't tweet that and he calls himself one of these developers. They make up a small portion of those developers that are still left at Ubisoft.
Basically, the people who don't want to put themselves out there on social media.
Problem is, while they're good, they don't have names, so they can't get jobs anywhere else. And then the vast majority of developers is what he call dead weight. They don't know how to do anything. No matter what you give them, they're pretty much always doing it wrong. But what they're very good at is social change, pushing social change.
The insider went on to specifically.
How obscure is that? A developing team and their strong suit is pushing social change. Isn't that kind of backwards?
Specifically criticized the third group, suggesting that they prioritize social change and activism over actual game development, further alienating any of the actual talent that remains at Ubisoft. Even the insider was fed up with the activism in gaming and felt it was genuinely detracting from the overall quality of the work being done at the company on a daily basis. These people leaking this information to YouTubers want their companies to succeed, they want to survive, and they see them being rotted from the.
I don't know about them wanting the companies to succeed. I think it's more of a, and again, it's an assumption from my end that they just genuinely want to explain that not everyone in Ubisoft is bad, but they are being pushed into a position where they could literally end up not being hired anywhere else because of the decisions the higher ups make.
Inside out, and it always ends up being the same problem. Activists!
So basically, if you can't do the job that you were hired for, make sure that you become a political activist, is what I took from that.
The leaked PDF pointed to Ubisoft
That's so sad. It's like, oh, you don't know coding? You're hired.
finally recognizing that their failed attempts to cater to the widest audience possible, read the modern audience. While Akelorn didn't show the PDF specifically for fear of giving away the source, everything he talks about lines up with how Ubisoft had come out with additional information on Assassin's Creed Shadows in the following days after he got the leaked emails. So I'm inclined to believe him. He comes across as a very trustworthy source, and honestly, he's a good YouTuber. He's someone that I've been watching for a while, and I could see a developer watching him and trusting him with the information. So take it with a grain of salt as a rumor, which he even says in his video, but at the same time, it all kind of checks out.
Casual gamers only buy about 1.4 games a year. So trying to...
And this is what I was wrong with. Like, my understanding of the casual gamer was really wrong. I was under the assumption that the casual gamer actually plays more games than the hardcore audience. Because I thought, so since there's more casual gamers, it results in higher volume numbers. But I found out that the only way casual gamers add to the number of a game is if a content creator or a person who reviews games, etc., loves the game. And that way, the casual gamers see that that person is loving the game, and it just spreads like wildfire.
To make games for the casual audience will almost never work, because they only, and this is where it gets really funny, casual gamers only buy games when it is must-have games, as deemed by expert gamers.
Like, for example, Baldur's Gate 3, Dark Souls, Wukong, they were deemed as must-have games.
The leaked document also discussed Ubisoft's research, revealing casual gamers buy an average of 1.4 games a year, often following the recommendations of hardcore gamers and influencers.
Now, at no point here do they actually mention DEI, but from what I've been told by the insider, they wouldn't mention DEI. But reading through the whole document, you get a sense that they are talking about DEI without ever actually naming it. Because obviously, they don't want to become front page news for the gamer or PC games.
Interestingly, as I stated earlier, the document avoids mentioning DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives directly. It's clear to anyone paying attention here that the way Ubisoft is breaking everything down, that they are now picking up on the concerns of how DEI has completely destroyed their industry.
and it's so many years late. The fact that it took them this long, I'm assuming like what, 1,342 meetings to understand how much is actually damaging the company. And they realize it when they're literally at bankruptcy is mind baffling.
But they do state very clearly, you figure out who the audience is, you make that game for that audience, and it doesn't matter who is excluded, it doesn't matter who doesn't like the game, you have your audience.
Then we get to the team leadership at Ubisoft and how it's devolved into a role defined by endless meetings and logistics, like I said earlier, with little to no creative involvement, and as a result, capable developers avoid taking any leadership roles, leaving those roles to the far less competent individuals who perpetuate dysfunction and prioritize non-developmental agendas, because at the end of the day, the people that are taking these jobs are not qualified. They are, most people would look at saying, they're potentially DEI hires.
Well, I'm not gonna call them DEI hires. I would just call them quota hires. And how people sleep at night knowing that they're just a quota, I never understood that.
Taking on these positions, unqualified being a developer, and then propping up activism as something to stand on because they don't actually have any talent and development in the first place. It's a downward spiral where management roles were ended up being given out to anybody but actual qualified leaders at the company.
Being a team lead is now such a horrendous job
Yeah.
that most good developers, so people who actually care about making video games,
No,
don't
it
want to
makes
become a team
sense.
lead, ever, because team leads no longer develop games. Team leads just sit in meetings all day,
Yep.
figuring out the logistics of how to make a video game. So you're good.
So you're removing the team lead from the actual project. So the team lead cannot even have a feel for it. That's honestly just the most brain dead logic.
Developers, they don't become team leads, which automatically means it's the bad ones that become the team leads and start pushing for social change and all the rest of it.
The PDF reportedly compares the performance of AAA
This explains a lot of disassociation that's been happening between games and the people who are in charge of it.
blockbusters against indie titles, many of which achieve
And the customers. I forgot to mention that.
remarkable success with bare bones resources. Ubisoft's insanely high budgeted projects always seem to lag behind the smaller focused games from the indie developers.
PDF actually highlights just how bad AAA games have become. They start with a slide that shows 10 different games, some of them being outside sort of AA games, and then some of them being super big AAA games. The super big AAA games all run hundreds of millions of budgets. Some of these games on here, like Palworld, were made by 6 people, right? So clearly not hundreds of millions of dollars. And then they ask them, how do you think these games did? And as it turns out, the big budget AAA games was dead last on that list.
And this here was proof that the sheer nature of Ubisoft's current practices are unsustainable in the long run, and highlights a complete failure to adapt to the changing industry dynamics, because at the end of the day, Ubisoft thinks that what they used to do that was working would just work forever, instead of taking a step back and saying, looks like the market's changing a little bit, and this is...
It's not even like the market didn't really fully change. Yes, there's been some changes, but it didn't fully change. People still expect entertaining, good coded games. That's it. The fact that they think it changed, that they need to cater to some specific people, genuinely just in their head. They thought they're expanding to that quote-unquote modern audience to finesse them into it, while at the same time kind of brainwashing people into thinking that this is how the games are supposed to now. This is why they were throwing fits, that their audience is not accepting these new games with the ideologies, because they thought they can double dip. In the end, they just dipped into an audience that says that they want this in a game, but they don't buy games.
This is the type of game and style that players actually want. They went the opposite direction.
So making a game for the hardcore audience will automatically mean that a lot of casual gamers will also buy it, Whereas making a game for the more sort of general audience will almost always put off the hardcore gamer, because hardcore gamers care about one thing and one thing only. Is this a must-have game, and what void does it actually fill?
The insiders
This is something I do have to fully agree, and I've been saying this for a long time.
His message corroborates long-standing criticisms of Ubisoft's leadership being detached from both its workforce and the gamers playing the games. Ubisoft's heavy reliance on market research rather than, I don't know, listening to their own developers or understanding the player base has left the company struggling to remain relevant in a rapidly evolving industry. And at this point, based off the finances that Ubisoft has and their what feels like an all-time low of stock price, they are not long for this planet. And they got no one to blame but themselves. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. If you guys want more information, check out SmashJT.com.
Great video. I feel like this information will help a lot of people who once dearly loved Ubisoft trying to understand what the hell is happening.